You are listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 80. Are you thinking of starting a podcast? If so, today I'm going to share my journey of starting a podcast and why I love it so much. But I'm also going to be chatting about how to get started because it's not as complicated as it might seem. Trust me on that. So without further ado, let's dive on in. Hey there, I'm your host, Jessica Fragon, and I am passionate about doing the inner work needed to reach your goals. Let me be your guide as we navigate all the fears and insecurities that surface when it's time to step outside of your comfort zone. Along with my knowledgeable guests and industry experts, I'm here to teach you how to reawaken your life purpose and passion and create the steps to turn your intentions into action. Ultimately, my goal is to empower you to rise above those blocks holding you back and start living a life that you are worthy and deserving of. So come on, it's time to slow down, find a comfy spot with your favorite organic tea, and get inspired. Thank you for tuning in to the Love Unplugged podcast. Happy Saturday morning, loves. I'm so honored to have you guys join me for another Self Saturdays episode. But to begin, I want to share how I'm setting myself up for this episode. So as always, I'm drinking Woosh Wellness tea, my go-to organic loose leaf tea that I highly encourage you guys to try. It is so freaking good. But in my cup today is Digest because it is the only thing that soothes an upset stomach for me. I have a very sensitive tummy, unfortunately. I'm also diffusing my Sage Essential Oil Goddess because it's Friday and I feel like I nailed it today. So let's get back to the episode. Starting a podcast. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a backstory as to how I even started this podcast, why it scared me, what delayed me, and then the steps that I took to start. Now I'm going to keep this kind of bird's eye view, just not to overwhelm you guys. You can definitely reach out to me separately or directly, to have any more details or if you need any more advice on how to start yours. As you guys may know, I started my blog as a wedding blog, and I was interviewing entrepreneurs. I was interviewing married couples, kind of like Harry Met Sally style a little bit, and doing videos. And I really loved meeting people. I really loved connecting with people. And then I started thinking, okay, maybe I can actually turn this blog into a business. You know, I'm loving it so much. So I started meeting with a business coach, and through those meetings, I started figuring out, okay, maybe I can start adding more things to my goals and seeing where else I can take this business. So I made this list of all these things that I thought that I could potentially do down the road. And because I loved connecting with people so much and hearing their stories, I thought, okay, I'll just put podcast on the list, but I'm probably not going to do it. And the reason why is because I am terrified. Well, I used to be terrified of speaking into a microphone. My ears go red. My brain disconnects from my mouth. I don't even know what I'm saying, to be honest. And it's pretty sad considering I used to hold large departmental training sessions, and I used to lead huge project meetings with multiple companies, executives and stuff, and it didn't even faze me. But for some reason, throw a mic in front of me and I'm kind of done for. So I had this on my list and I wasn't even really paying attention to it. And we are going through, me and my business coach, we are going through the list, and she's like, you need to start a podcast next. And I was like, crap. I really didn't want to, but I trusted my coach. I think she was definitely right in the end. And I'm happy that she pushed me towards that. But it took me a while to get this started. I had those fears. Once I started kind of looking into podcasts more and more and more, I saw how many people were doing podcasts and how all topics are covered and all that type of stuff. And not being able to provide value and making sure that my listeners were getting enough value from the episodes that they were spending time tuning into was really important to me. So I wanted to make sure that, I was doing it right. So there's a lot of things like that was kind of happening with me internally. And then I started looking into actually how to start it, and the whole tech aspect really freaked me out because okay, yes, I am pretty good with technology. Yes, I'm really good on a computer, software, Microsoft, all that stuff, CRM systems, whatnot. But when it comes to that whole programming and the back end kind of stuff, I have no clue. So, setting up a podcast and setting it to iTunes and Spotify and all that stuff, like I couldn't even wrap my head around how to even do that, to be honest. And that really stopped me in my tracks. And it took me quite a few months to get past that. And I'm going to kind of walk you through what I did to start my podcast and the steps that I slowly start to take to get it off the ground. So very first thing is I needed to start slow because I got really overwhelmed with everything that needed to be done. So I started looking at the types of topics that I wanted to cover. First of all, what did I want to talk about on this podcast? What was I really passionate about? What was really interesting to my community? What did they love most about what I was already doing? Things like that. And I figured out that, I really wanted to continue talking to entrepreneurs and married couples, things like that, around everything love. Whether it was love relationships, love self-love, love for your business, your passion projects, things like that. I wanted to have the podcast completely surrounded, or the podcast topics completely based on love. So from there, I had to figure out a podcast name that aligned with the topics that I wanted to share. Now, this is super important. You need to make sure that your podcast name makes sense with everything that you're going to be sharing through your podcast. You never want to have a podcast name that completely doesn't align with the topics that you're covering, because you're going to confuse your audience. You're going to confuse new people that are coming to your podcast expecting one thing, and then they're getting a whole bunch of other things, or they just have absolutely no idea what you're even sharing. So you want to make it super easy for them to know what they're coming to your podcast for, what they're going to get, and it just all makes sense and it's all aligned. So I had a really big struggle coming up with a name. I made so many damn lists of potential names. It was insane. I spent so much time researching, different things and, putting different words together and doing different combinations and all that stuff. So eventually I came up with like a whole list. I think it was about a 1-page list of all the names that I kind of narrowed down to. And I went through it with my business coach and we both landed on Love Unplugged. And I absolutely love it. I think it's absolutely perfect because, again, I wanted to share everything based on love, and I wanted it to be like heart-to-heart conversations where a friend was joining us at the coffee table and they were, listening to us chat about whatever we were talking about. And I really wanted it to be unplugged, really. So it made so much more sense at that time, and it just clicked. The next thing that I tried to figure out was exactly what I was going to be doing with the show, what the show structure was going to be like. So was I going to be doing guest shows? Was I going to be doing solo shows, a combination? And I landed on guest shows at first. Now, there's pros and cons to both of them. There's, they're both really, really great. I think they're both good for different things as well. But because I was already so terrified of speaking into a microphone, having me talk for an entire episode was even more terrifying. So guest shows were definitely a lot easier to begin with, but I also loved the connections that I had with all the interviews I was doing for the blog. So I wanted to keep that going. And I just didn't feel at that time that I had enough really to share, or that I knew what I wanted to share as a solo show. So I started out with guests, and it was fantastic, to be honest, but I'll get into that after. Now, the episode flow. There's so many different ways that you can structure your actual episode, and everybody does it differently. There's no right or wrong way. It's just kind of what you prefer. So I was listening to all these different shows and kind of seeing what everybody else was doing, but then figuring out what I liked most about all these different shows. What aspects did I like? So I landed on doing an intro like I did today, and then having my general intro for the podcast with some music, and then I would have my podcast, and then I would have my general outro. And it just felt like it worked for me, and that's something that I liked. But again, everybody does it differently, so I encourage you to, tune into your favorite podcast episodes and, really determine what you love most and what you would like to roll out on your show. Now, the next thing that I did was guest research, and this does take a lot of time. This is probably, even to date, the one thing that I spend probably the most amount of my time on is researching guests and, really narrowing down on what their story is, who they are, what are they sharing, what are they about, things like that, and picking the ones that I know my community is going to want to hear from and adding variety to it as well. So you're going to want to narrow down about 10 potential guests, maybe more if you want, and you're going to want to email them eventually. But you want to have this list kind of ready to go so that you can start pitching to people when you're ready. The next thing that I did, because I had my name, I had my topics, I was aligning my podcast with my blog. So my business, it wasn't completely separate. So my branding and all that stuff would follow suit with my business. So that was easy, and I got pictures done. So you need a cover piece for your podcast. And then you need graphics for all the promotions that you're going to be doing on your social media channels, on your blog, and all that stuff as well. Next comes the tech. Now, I figured out through a lot of research what equipment I would need, what software I would need, things like that. So I settled on a Blue Yeti mic, one that has a USB that can just connect to my laptop. I purchased a really good laptop that had a lot of RAM and all that stuff because I was doing videos and things like that on my computer as well. And that's really all you need. For the actual equipment is just a computer and a mic. That's it. And even if you don't have a mic, you can always start off with just your plug-in headphones that has the mic attached. It's not a big deal. Don't get so caught up on getting fancy equipment because you can really start with anything. Now, that's what I chose for the equipment, but now getting it off to iTunes and Spotify. Now, I had no idea, and for the platform that I was going to be hosting my podcast on, I chose Libsyn, which a lot of people recommended, and it was had high reviews or great reviews. So I decided on them, but actually setting it up, I had no idea what I was doing, and I had no idea who to ask for help either. So I went to Fiverr. Fiverr is your best friend. And it was so cheap, and he did it all for me super quick, done within a few days, and it was literally $60 or something like that Canadian. It was so cheap, and it took all the stress away from me trying to figure it out, and it was just all done, which I highly recommend. If that is what is stopping you from moving forward, just hire somebody on Fiverr and let them handle it, and you don't worry about it. Now, the next thing that I needed to figure out was how I was going to record. So I do not have Apple, which Apple computers, you can use GarageBand, I believe, to record, which is super easy. So I had to figure out what recording software or program I was going to use, and I came across Audacity, which is a free downloadable program, which I am recording on right now. It is super reliable, super easy, and I do all my editing on it as well, and it's so easy to use. Now, if I was doing remote interviews, I had to figure out a way to do that. And of course, I listened to Jenna Kutcher, and she always recommended Zencastr. So I tried that out, and I absolutely love it. I actually recommend it over using Audacity because it records separate tracks. So you can edit each individual track on its own. So with Audacity or with Zoom, if you're doing the video interviews, you get one track for the entire interview, which means that if you guys are talking over each other, or, if there's things that you need to edit that you don't want to edit for one person, but you want to edit somebody else's, you can't do that. It's a lot more difficult. And I always loved Zencastr with the fact that I could take out things that I was saying if it overlapped with my guest, so that I didn't cut her off in the final interview, which I absolutely love. And I highly recommend Zencastr. It's been a great program. There was one technical There was one technical blimp one day, quite a few months ago, where a lot of my interviews that day kind of had some sound issues, but they fixed the issue, and I've never had an issue since. It's been great. Now, the next thing that a lot of people recommend, and I do as well, is have about 3 to 5 episodes up before launching. So don't just launch with one episode. You definitely want to have some up there that people can tune into and keep going once you do launch. That's really important. Now, the next piece was super important to me, and it's probably something that I try to focus on in anything that I do, is the guest experience, or whoever is coming on to the show, or whatever I do is I want to make it a good experience for that other person. So I really went out of my way to map out exactly what that guest experience was going to be like, to make it super easy for them to get all the information that they need, to know what's going on, to know when it's airing, all that stuff. So for me, I mapped it out completely from start to end, of pitching to whoever I was wanting to come on the show, all the way to letting them know that their episode was aired, and then even taking it one step further and sometimes sending them a survey after the fact to see how they felt about the episode, how they felt about the promotion, was it everything that they expected from, being a guest on my show, things like that. So you really want to make sure that that whole experience for them is just really easy, and it's fun, and they have everything that they need. They know what they're expecting, and you deliver on that. Now, lastly is why I love it, how it has benefited me. So it's definitely pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And now I can honestly say that I am way more at ease with a microphone, and my ears don't go red anymore. Yes, I do still fumble with my words, but it is so much easier, and I've actually fallen in love with talking into a microphone, talking with guests that I don't even know, connecting with people across the world in different countries. I can't recommend it enough. It's so great. Now, second thing is the amazing connections that you will gain through podcasting. So again, in your community, you only have so many people, but when you're podcasting, you're reaching out to people all over the world. I've had guests from the United States. I've had guests across Canada. I've had guests from Australia. And it's just so amazing to be able to connect with those people and hear their stories and what they're experiencing wherever they are, and how we can all still relate. I love, love, love the connections that I've made. Some of them have actually turned into really good friendships. It's just so great. I can't recommend it enough. The next one is, it's kind of like therapy in a way, because you get to talk things out a lot. And for me, I like to talk about feelings. I like to talk about, struggles. I like kind of vocalizing it and getting it out. Otherwise, I'm kind of just storing everything in. So for me, it's been very therapeutic. Now, I've kind of touched on this, but the stories that you're going to hear, the advice you're going to get, the tips is incredible. Like, you're getting firsthand insights. You're having the conversation, and you can just dive in as deep as you want into that story and really kind of pull things out. And it's so crazy how much information, how much value you can get from these stories that your guests are sharing, and how it can inspire you to grow as a person, to do more in your business. It's just such an incredible thing, and I highly recommend it. Now, the last thing is the community. It's created such an incredible community of people for me, and that is something that is super important to me, is to have this community available to everybody, and to have everybody sharing their stories, inspiring each other, and, encouraging each other to really push themselves outside of their comfort zone, go after their goals and dreams. And, I think it's really inspiring seeing other people do it. So it inspires you to do it as well. And it also tells you that it's possible. So I love the community that is created. So that wraps up another Self Saturdays episode. I hope that this inspires you guys to start your own podcast. And if you are looking for more advice or tips, definitely send me a DM. I'd love to connect with you guys. I'd love to help you start your own podcast and, give you any more advice that you guys may need based on what I've experienced and what I've learned through creating this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on these episodes. Are you liking them? Is there a certain topic that you want to hear from me on? I definitely want to know. I love connecting with you all, so please reach out, share your thoughts with me. You can do this by either leaving a review on the episode, or you can head over to my Instagram. My handle is @ProjectLoveCode and send me a DM. So have a wonderful Saturday, you guys. I hope you guys take some time to invest in yourselves today. I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to www.projectloveco.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another unplugged conversation.